Now, the question then is, well, what about false statements in public discourse, right? What about lies in public discourse, right? People tell lies and they influence others, and they have a serious impact potentially on how people vote and how they behave as political actors. And the court up till now has taken the view that those lies are not actionable, consistent with the First Amendment. And it's done that for basically two reasons. One of them is the chilling effect problem. If you know that you are going to be held or potentially be held liable for a statement you make in public discourse because some juror finds it to be false, you'll be very careful about what you say. And the sacrifice of freedom from that, the court says, is to be taken very seriously. The other and even more compelling justification is in the realm of public discourse, the idea of allowing government officials to decide which false statements to prosecute and which not to prosecute puts in the hands of public officials an extraordinary power to manipulate public discourse. And imagine, for example, if the Trump administration had the authority to decide which false statements it would prosecute and which it would not. It's easy to see how that would completely distort the marketplace of ideas. And so for those reasons, the court has basically taken the view that the government is not allowed to restrict that sort of false speech. Now, one of the interesting questions we face going forward in our society is up until now we've been able to rely upon what Holmes called the marketplace of ideas as a way of hoping to sort out truth and falsehood. That basically when people tell lies in public discourse, even if there's no criminal prosecution for it, other people will correct it, they will say the truth, and individual citizens will be able to decide for themselves in a rational way what is true and what is false. In the world of social media, that now becomes much more problematic. We now have a world in which people are increasingly fragmenting, polarizing in their sources of information, and in which they only hear one side of the debate. And in that context, false statements can have an increasingly powerful effect, much beyond what ever existed before. And whether that opens the door to saying there may be circumstances in which false statements can be restricted poses a really dire problem for democracy. For on the one hand, ignoring the problem is a problem. On the other hand, addressing it by allowing the government to decide who to prosecute and not to prosecute is also a dire problem. But that's something we will have to face going forward.
It sounds like you can dimly imagine Supreme Court changing First Amendment law.
I think
with respect to the way it protects.
I think they would be loath to do that. I think the danger of allowing government the power to decide who to prosecute and not to prosecute is overwhelming. But at the same time, we face a real problem of how do we address this polarization in information so as to avoid the kind of fragmentation and ignorance that this invites. And the solution shouldn't be prosecution. It should be figuring out ways to make people have access to ideas and facts different from the ones they're now choosing to focus on.
So the solution to lies in the public sphere is not going to come from law. You hope it doesn't come from law. It's got to come from the culture, from character, from something else.
Right. It'll come partly from education. I think we need to educate people much more seriously about the dangers of getting all of your information from highly polarized sources. And it'll also come, I think, from the media, from entities like, say, Facebook and others, who may start developing mechanisms, instead of sending people only things that reinforce what they already look at, instead beginning to send them sources of information that are different from the ones that they automatically look at.